Welcome to another edition of Success Talk. This is Dr. Herbert Harris bringing you interviews and messages and conversations about people who have accomplished incredible things, who face challenges, who've overcome odds, but who made breakthroughs to do and live their dreams. And today we have a good friend, a very, very special person, George McDaniel. George, welcome to Success Talk.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. It is an absolute pleasure to participate, and knowing your background as I do, I can't tell you how honored I am.
Well, I tell you, George, the honor is mine, man. Every time I think about some of the accomplishments that you have made, some of the places you have traveled, and some of the people you have interacted with, it's almost like, you know, to many young people today, they have no idea that people like you ever existed.
Well, my mother would have been very tickled to hear you say that. She would have laughed at it, but thank you for the thought.
But George, tell us a little about your background. You're a North Carolina fellow, a fellow North Carolinian.
I tell people whether I am standing on a street corner in LA or in a boardroom on Wall Street, I am a farm boy from Eastern North Carolina and very proud of it.
Wow.
I grew up I was born in Murfreesboro, and I grew up in Goldsboro.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a fourth generation farmer.
Wow.
And a little piece of dirt in Jones County.
All right.
That has been in the family since, oh, good Lord, back to the 19th century. And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
but I am a Tar Heel, despite the fact that I have not lived in North Carolina since 1971.
Uh-huh.
When I finished A&T.
Yes.
Magna cum laude. Thank God. Thank the Lord. Yeah, but I am a Tar Heel to my roots.
Yes. Well, now, George, when you came through high school, had the schools desegregated in North Carolina?
Nope. No.
Yeah.
In fact, my youngest brother was one of the first, who was 6 years younger than me, was one of the first African Americans in our county to attend the high school.
Mm.
And he went there in the 10th grade, ninth grade. He went there in the 9th grade, Goldsboro High School. And as an indicator of the times, and this is not meant necessarily to reflect on anybody in today's world, but when he and his other African-American youngster who was integrating to high school with him, when it came time to go to swimming class, they drained the pool and filled it up with dirt.
Wow.
And they didn't have swimming class for at least a couple of years.
Wow. That's deep.
Yeah,
that's deep.
I mean, you can't make that stuff up. I mean,
Yeah.
When I heard that, I didn't know how to react when he told me they had done that.
Yeah. Well, you know, George, I was working with a principal in a high school, and she was a white lady, but a predominantly Black high school. No, it was elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing some really consciousness building sessions, get to know people better. And, you know, we would dig in and say, well, what was your feeling? You know, what one thing did integration represent to you? And, you know, I had a couple of people there that were like first generation, the first time they integrated to Wilmington College. And she was saying, oh, you know, the professors wouldn't even look at you when they talked to you. But this one lady said, she said, the thing that I really hated about integration was when they integrated, they stopped having the proms, because the thought of a Black boy and a white girl going to the prom together, they shut down the proms for like 5 or 6 years. And so it just amazes us. But it also, I think it gives us an indication of how deep that racist consciousness is in our culture.
The I first of all, I identify totally with what you said. Uh, Understand it at depth, I think, and I'm always driven back to one basic identity around the whole concept of racism, discrimination, etc. You can't keep the other person down without being down in the mud with them.
Wow.
So as a result, racism by definition leads to subpar productivity, subpar performance, etc. In other words, wherever, whatever the state of existence is, prosperity, etc., if it's in a racist society, everybody could be doing better if there was not racism.
Yes.
Because it's just wasted productivity, effort, etc., for one person. Forget one group, one person to keep another person down.
Yes.
It's that simple.
Yes. And you know, George, can you imagine? America is a great place. I mean, people all over the world are trying to get here, and I don't blame them. Okay.
Yep.
But can you imagine an America that after the Civil War had embraced the true spirit of what the war was about, you know, that in the words of the Constitution, you know, that we are all, yes, we are all human beings, you know, endowed with certain inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Can you imagine where America would be if they embraced that? And so the Black Wall Street in Tulsa would be, man, there may be a whole new stock exchange on the West Coast now, you know.
And we're beginning, I think, I hope / think, we're beginning to see finally with the current generation, the millennials, is Gen Z, I think they're called.
Yes.
Some of the emergence of these old ideas in a 21st century internet connected fashion, so that these things that are coming again. And this time we have two generations, at least two full generations of folks who've been able to avail themselves of educational and experiential opportunities so that progress will occur now.
Yes.
Because once you open the door and let sunshine in, people generally will not let that door close again.
That's right. Beautiful. That's powerful. So now, George, you went to A&T, and what was that like?
I finished A&T. I had a little bit of just being honest, a little bit of a checkered undergrad history. I was one of the very early Black undergrads at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill.
Okay.
Spent 3 years there. Misplaced as the major, by the way. I have no problem with that. We were not treated fairly, etc. But I was also not in the field I should have been in.
Yeah. Okay.
But I wound up for a short while at Hampton, which was a wonderful experience. And I feel very strongly about this, and is something that others may or may not agree with. I think that attending an HBCU, whether one does it for a little while or for their entire academic career,
yes,
you see things in a different light at an HBCU, and it changes your perspective for the rest of your life and days.
Yes.
And I came from a segregated environment, etc., but it was just wonderful attending Hampton, and equally so at A&T. I got drafted out of Hampton. My brother and I, my middle brother and I, were drafted together. And when I say drafted together, we slept beside each other in basic training.
Wow. Yeah.
Because that's what was happening in those times. If you were young, general of limited economic means, and reasonably healthy, meaning that finger worked, You were in male, you were going to get drafted, especially if you were a person of color.
Mm.
We got drafted, and I wound up doing 2 tours in Vietnam. The second one voluntarily.
Yes.
I never said I was smart, but I was able to. The military changed my life in that it gave me a sense of purpose and discipline. That despite the discipline that I had acquired in younger life working on farms, I still did not know what the world was all about. The military showed me what the world could be about.
Yes.
And I had met my wife now of 54 years while at
Wow.
Hampton.
Yes. Yes.
And I did not get a Dear John letter. I got Dear George letters. My entire time, and we married, and we've been married for 54 years, and she's been with me through it all. And the point that I'm making there, we see the divorce statistics, et cetera, and we've been through our tough times, et cetera. But when you find the right partner in life, there's nothing better.
Wow. Wow.
There's nothing better, and there's nothing more. There is nothing more uplifting, more encouraging, and it gives you strength at times when you didn't know you had that strength, because it's not just you.
Yes. Yes.
You leave the realm of just you and move into us.
Yes.
And us is always more powerful than me.
Wow.
Again, personal feeling.
Yeah. But when you look at relationships and you look at the spiritual, the mastermind principle, 2 or more gather on one accord. When you have 2 people on one accord, man, that's a power that is unstoppable. And
that's the word, unstoppable.
Yes. And the beauty is, you found it early. Many of us had to go through 3 or 4, at least 2 or 3, attempts before we finally figured it out. So that's a blessing, man. Yeah.
My wife figured it out long before I did.
Okay.
Extraordinarily intelligent, beautiful, et cetera, et cetera. But with a sense of understanding of who she was and what the world around her was about, that she had, that I did not have. I had to grow into that, and it's as if she had that with her mother's milk.
Yes. Wow.
That has made a dramatic difference in my life, because it's given me, as I said, strength at times that I didn't know. And it also gave me a sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose is incredibly important, whatever one is involved in.
Yes. Yes.
When one has that sense of purpose, it's like doors open that you didn't even know existed.
Wow. Yes. Yes. Wow. Well, I wish so many of our young people, I wish we could, box that up and share it with them. When we look at the divorce rate now, and, people don't understand the power of that mastermind, that collection of 2 minds working on one accord. And that, man, as you say, unstoppable, but it also gives you a sense of that nothing, that there's nothing on earth that can stop you, that can undermine you, that as long as you're together, bring it on.
and in fact, those experiences, you don't learn nearly as much from pleasure as you do from pain.
Okay.
Because the painful experiences are the ones that wake you up in the middle of the night.
Yes.
And they are the ones where the lessons dig deep, and you say, well, I don't want to do that again.
Yes. Yes.
But those painful experiences are where the greatest growth comes. That's been my experience.
I tell you, yes. Yes. Well, mine too, George. It's out of the challenges, I guess if there was no Goliath, we'd never be talking about David.
This is very true. This is very true.
You
You
know?
know, these lessons I think about a lot. I have thought throughout my career, whether as a banker,
Yes,
lender, or as a commercial or investment banker, or as an entrepreneur, you always you're always meeting the unanticipated.
yes,
And no matter how much one plans, no matter how much one prepares oneself, there's always something that happens that's unanticipated. And when one has these lessons already,
yes.
the unknown does not scare you away.
Wow.
It scares you, but
Yes,
uh,
yes, yeah.
that's part of life. But
But
it does not scare you away because you have the confidence that you've gotten through that pain before. So that means you're going to get through it again.
we know there's a beautiful quote that says, it's not that we don't fear, but it's that we are not overcome by fear. Wow. Yeah.
The most courageous person on the battlefield
Uh-huh.
is not, at least in my experience,
Uh-huh.
little sinus.
Uh-huh.
It's not the person who stands and pounds their chest and says, "I'm the toughest SO you know what in the
Yes,
valley."
yes, yeah.
It's the guy who is scared, so scared his knees are knocking together.
Uh-huh.
But despite that, he steps up, puts his weapon on his shoulder, and steps forward,
That's what you
despite
got.
that fear.
Wow.
And that's the person that you know you are going to be able to count on.
Yes,
And
yes,
that's whether it's on a battlefield or it's on in a boardroom or in Wall Street or San
yeah.
Francisco or Chicago.
Well, George, there's so many things. J.P. Morgan, I think I read, he said something to the effect that, I'm not so concerned about the guy who's doing well and paying his bill and succeeding, but I want to know about the guy who takes a hit, man, and loses it all, who goes under and still survives and comes back. He said, that's the kind of man I want to deal with. Yeah.
For that very reason, you know what they're going to do when times get tough,
Yes, yes.
because times have gotten tough and they've come through it.
Well, George, you hit a point, and so for many of our young people, when I was a young man, we always had that feeling, and I remember from school that the military service would help teach you discipline, help get you in line, and I find now, especially in our community, so many of the young men don't see that as a viable way, a way out, a way to get what they want. And then number two, many of them, because of some of the arrest stuff and the record stuff, by the time they're old enough to go into the service, they are already precluded. And so you just said that was for our young people, how that helped you really define yourself.
Yeah, you have a critical point there, several critical points. On the one hand, the military gave me a sense of discipline, etc., and recognized it was at the time easily the most colorblind institution in our society. And it was not colorblind, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it was better than outside the military. At the same time, I saw it beat down young brothers like myself, most younger. I saw them beaten down by the racism and inequality that did exist. Uh, because what the military, kind of like the old, I think it's a Japanese parable, maybe, the nail that stands up gets beaten down.
Yes. Yes.
And in the military, you learn not to be the nail that stands up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one learns to follow orders.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
at times, you're following the orders of idiots.
Yes. Yes.
But
Yes.
still, it's important to have that knowledge and that discipline. And I found myself in both situations during the military And those lessons have been with me through life. And I see a lot of young folks today. And I've mentored, well, I was about to say a few, more than a few young folks along the way. And very, very proud of most of them. And I
Yes.
continue to do that to this day. And I see in them, when they come to me, they're coming to the old guy who's been there and all of that. But part of what they are also coming to, I think,
Uh-huh.
is that sense, not just the sense of accomplishment, but the sense of discipline that they see,
Mm.
and not quitting.
Yes.
This, you know, you don't lose. You don't lose when you lose.
Yes.
That sounds a little strange.
Yeah.
Well, you don't lose until you quit.
Mm. Okay.
Because as long as you are able to exert effort,
Yes.
there's hope.
Yes. Hope.
And one must always try to be intelligent about stuff, reasonable, rational, planful,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is you got to put in the work.
Got to put in the work. And in every loss, there's a lesson.
Every every loss, there's a lesson.
Wow.
And again, there are more lessons. I believe there are more lessons in the losses than there are in the wins.
Wow. I tell
Just
you, that's beautiful.
yeah.
Now, George, you made the transition from A&T coming out of the HBCU. And let me just make a
Mhm.
point. I totally agree. Now, I didn't go to an HBCU.
Mhm. Well,
And
you went to Williston High School, which
yeah,
is almost an
that's about the
HBCU.
closest thing you can get. Yeah, without going there. Yeah. But I noticed, Sandra graduated from A&T. Many of my, classmates. I was, I think, the first kid to go to an Ivy League school from my city. And when I see them now, I see a certain camaraderie. For years, I never went back to my campus for like 30 years because I didn't feel a sense of connectedness. I was just there, get an education and get on out. It was only, I think, when President Obama, I think, was in the class of 83 and
Mhm.
around that time, and some brilliant person said, there must have been black guys who graduated before him. and, and they went back and dug up some of us from the 60s. And they were like amazed when I attended. My daughter graduated from Columbia on the 50th anniversary of my graduation. Okay.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And the difference in her class, there were about 115 people of color. In my class, there were 2. you know?
I got that T-shirt.
Yes, 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 yes. So, I just want to put a pin in that because there's a cultural thing. The education, one of the things I learned was the education was not just about the classes,
Oh,
but it was a
absolutely
total
not.
experience. And so I take my hat off to the HBCUs because look at the products it has created.
When I was in Vietnam, and Vietnam obviously was a very pivotal moment in my life. And I am thankful to this day that I came through it the way I did. And I ran into Hampton classmates in Vietnam.
Yes, yes,
And there was a sense of shared experience, camaraderie as you speak.
yeah,
Just it's hard to put into words. You felt like you almost felt like crying when
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I
Wow.
it was remarkable. And my closest friendships in life pretty much
Yeah,
are people that I either went to undergrad or grad school with, and were associates and friends in those early years.
yes,
Most of color, not all, but
yes,
most of color
yes,
in those early years, in the first 10 or 15 years of one's career.
yes.
And those are deep. I can finish their sentences and vice versa. even
Wow.
though I might not have seen them in 20 or 30 years.
Yes. Wow. Well, I guess depend that I have my granddaughter's now a freshman at A&T. My my
Wonderful.
my grandson will be starting next year at A&T.
Well,
And so I'm convinced, and I insisted, I'm like, yeah, you believe, trust me, you're going, okay, and you're gonna like it.
the irony is I feel incredibly supportive, etc., of A&T. My father, from a fourth generation farmer, my father was third generation.
Mhm.
My father graduated from A&T in agriculture and was a county farm agent, in
Mm.
addition to our owning the family farm, which we worked on.
Yeah.
And I've been going to A&T literally since I was 6 months old, and he came home from World War II. I'd been
Wow.
born while he was in the South Pacific fighting
Yeah.
with the 25th Infantry.
Yes.
Uh,
Wow.
but bottom line is A&T is deeply embedded in my soul. And
Yes. Yes.
it's not the same as Vatican City, but it comes close.
It comes close. All right. Beautiful. Now, George, you made a transition from the college into the corporate world. How did that take place?
Um, when I was in Vietnam, I read about this graduate, and I had not finished undergrad yet, but I
Uh-huh.
read in Stars and Stripes, which everybody scanned every day because I don't know why the U.S. military did it then, but they had a listing of all the KIAs
Uh-huh.
every day in Stars and Stripes.
Mm.
Um, and you always scan to see if anybody you knew
Yeah.
was no longer with us.
And make
And I
sure your name wasn't there.
make sure your name's not out there. That was first.
Yeah. Yeah.
In any event, I read about this program that had just started called the Consortium. And it was a new foundation that was going to send kids of color, African Americans, to graduate school for business to get this new degree called an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration, which had been around for about 50 years, but only in a few select schools.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at that and thought, there's somebody's going to give me pay for me to go to grad school.
Mm.
I don't care. I don't care what I do after, but I know I'll be doing something more than I would have been doing before.
Yes.
That literally gave me the incentive to come home and go back to undergrad school and make sure I finished with the best grades I could. And I finished 63 hours with magna cum laude.
Wow.
And I I had no idea I was graduating with honors. But
Mm.
just like with my brother and I were drafted together, we were back in A&T together, and we sat beside each other at our graduation.
Wow.
And
Man.
I was reading the maybe folks want to hear this and maybe
Uh-huh.
they don't, but I've just had a series of comedic events in my life.
Uh-huh.
I'm sitting in the graduation ceremony, cap, gown, robe, just proud as can be. My brother
Uh-huh.
beside me, and I'm reading the program, and I come to my name and his name.
Uh-huh.
We're right above each other, and there's this asterisk beside my name, and I thought, oh my God, what did I do?
Yeah.
What did I do? I was beside myself. I was about to
Uh-huh.
stand up or something,
Yeah.
and I nudged my brother and said, what is this? He looked at it and he turned to me, leaned over. You're great. You're graduating magna cum laude, you dumb. You know what? S. I, you could have bought me for a penny, as my
Oh,
daddy would
wow.
have said.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
in any event, the AMT was a wonderful experience. And I treasure that. I treasure my association with my uh, uh, 22 classmates of color
Uh-huh.
at UNC. and
Yes.
we are all very close to this day.
Yes. Yes.
But A&T was different.
Yes.
A&T was home in so many ways, and
Wow.
continues to be.
Yes. Wow. So now the MBA program. Now, where was that? Where did you go to school to do the MBA?
I went to Indiana University
Uh-huh.
in Bloomington.
Okay.
Perhaps I shouldn't say this, but I will. I had my choice of grad schools to go to because I applied. I applied to 30 schools over the course of a year.
Wow.
Took me 8 or 9 months of that year to apply to all the schools because I was working and taking a full load, etc.
Mm.
But I obviously had the grades by then, and I aced the entrance exams.
Okay.
I've just always been good at taking exams and don't know why.
Yeah.
My mother's the reason for that. In any event, I was admitted to every school I applied to. We're surprised that you know what out of me.
Yeah.
But including Harvard, Wharton, Columbia, no offense intended.
Yes.
But I had wanted to go to Indiana and the consortium ever since I read about that in Stars and Stripes.
Wow. Okay.
And they offered me a fellowship, and I wound up going to Indiana to IU, and just had a wonderful 2-year experience there. Was one of the first 2 African Americans to work as a graduate assistant in the business school, taught a course, and was elected MBA association, the student association vice president, and just had a wonderful experience. And it just it was very comforting at that point.
Yeah. Well, George, it's just so, in working with young people today, I get a sense that they don't know a lot of these things exist. It's like you came from, like I say, a farmer's background, but a farmer coming through the college. Okay. Okay. You came to, Sandra was like that. Sandra, the Spalding family, they all like 4 or 5 of them went to A&T, and they were farmers, but they came through that education piece. And so
pardon my interruption, but Sandra's from Bladen County then?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Sandra Spalding. Yes.
Her uncle Asa Spalding was the district agent for the state of North Carolina and was my father's boss.
Wow. And Asa was our friend, man. In his last years, we spent some time hanging out. We hung out in Washington, D.C., and I took him down to what was that place? It's down in the railroad station. They had a restaurant.
Not Penn Station.
I think it was Penn Station, where you have all the stores, all the shops. And the lady who had a restaurant, oh man, she had a restaurant in New York, very popular, Black woman, B. Smith.
Yeah.
And I took him there, man, to B. Smith's, and man, I tell you, he had a ball. I think they wanted. We left a big tip because we stayed so long. We probably kept people from coming in. We said we better tip these people well. But he had a chance to talk of some of the things. So that Spalding family, that's a whole nother rich piece. And one of the most famous Spalding members is Stedman Graham.
I did not know that.
Yes, Stedman.
I did not know that.
Yes, Stedman is one of the Spalding members, because the Spaldings, the interesting thing, that family got their freedom in 1799.
Ooh.
And so they existed there in Bladen County during slavery, right at the birth of the nation. And they maintained their integrity. So what they did, they had to marry a lot of the Indians.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so Stedman is part of that part Indian, but they're all together. I was just with him. He was here in Wilmington in August. We had a family reunion.
Oh, wonderful.
We had a ball. But once again, the whole family had a value for education.
And you put a pin in that
Yes.
value for education. My grandfather had that same value, and he never attended a school in his life.
Yes.
He was a mulatto
Yes.
and
Yes.
couldn't attend either, but he had a photographic memory
Yes.
and always prospered and always valued education. And he sent every one of his 7 children to
Wow.
college.
Isn't that something?
And he was technically illiterate. My grandmother taught him to write his name, but
Wow.
because he was so intelligent, folks didn't know he was illiterate.
Wow. Isn't
He
that
could
something?
not read or write.
Well, Vic Hackley. I don't know if you know Vic.
No, I
Vic
don't.
Hackley. Vic Hackley, Dr. Vic Hackley. He's been interim president of different colleges. I think Vic was an interim chancellor of A&T for a minute. When how you have certain guys that whenever institutions are going through the change and they bring them in to hold it all together. Well, Vic was one of those kind of guys. Vic
Holy
Hackley.
cow.
Yeah. And one of the things he used to say, he said that a thing that amazes him was the fact that, and he came along kind of in our era, and he says that uneducated grandparents and parents had such a high esteem, held education in such high value that they made sure that their kids went to school.
Period. You didn't have a choice.
Yeah, it was not an option. You either live or go to college.
Well,
you either die or go to college. One or the other. Yeah.
And that message came through very clear, very early in life. So early that I never knew that I had any option.
Yeah. And he said the amazing thing now is people who've had education are often not having that same insistence to their kids.
Oh, yeah, that's a part. Our daughters I have two daughters, thank God, very successful in life and just wonderful parents, etc. And my youngest daughter, who's in her 40s now, said the other day she didn't know she had a choice to go to college or not.
Yeah. You see, and that's something we got to work on. That's there's so many little nuggets there that like almost the underbelly of education. Those little things that if you didn't know it, you wouldn't know it if somebody didn't tell you.
Yeah, the irony is today with a lot of the young folks that I come into contact with and have over the years, many of them will do fine in some especially tech-related fields without necessarily having a degree, but the degree will simply attending college and spending time on a campus with one's peers at those ages will add dimensions to your life that would not be there otherwise.
Exactly. Wow.
I truly feel strongly about that.
I tell you, that mastermind, those 2 or more minds coming together on one accord has so many levels of realization. Wow.
Well, my father always said, I can't use some of the words my daddy used, but basically, you're going to get out of here.
Yeah.
First of all, you're going to get out of here and you're going to go to college.
Yes.
And the bottom line, he said, was that the college degree, and my father was very, very wise man. And I always knew that and felt that. And he said that the college degree doesn't say that you know anything, but what it does say is that you are willing and capable of learning anything. And the light went on.
Yeah.
And that's what it does. And just the college experience says the same thing, but especially the college degree.
Yes.
And I got to make one little plug here too.
Go ahead.
And my grandfather would be very proud. My oldest grandchild is 22 years old and has been lauded by USA Today Black Enterprise, and a few other folks, is being a computer genius
Yes. Yes.
and has his own software development firm with full-time folks, and has 4 online apps, open
Wow.
source, that
Wow.
address many of the subjects we're talking about. And
Wow.
that is education for young kids of color, whether
Yes.
they're in the 6th grade or in their 20s and college grads,
Uh-huh.
and how to first how to study and learn, but then
Yes.
how to manage one's life as one goes further beyond that. And he's a student, not enrolled currently, but
Uh-huh.
at Stanford University's D school, which is basically their computer school, is my
Yes.
understanding.
Yes.
But bottom line is the struggle continues.
Yes.
Despite that, he still runs into the periodic incident, despite the background, the capability, demonstrated worth, etc. Folks see the skin color before they see the person.
Isn't that something? Wow.
It's encouraging and discouraging all at the same time. It's encouraging simply because he has the courage to stand up,
Yes.
and it's not just for him, for quote us.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
but beyond that, obviously it's discouraging because I had hope, literally, and it was very naive, and I'm certain you had some of the same hopes,
Yes.
that in the 60s, in our 20s and 30s, we never dreamed that we would be in a world that'd be polarized around uh, so-called far right, far left issues, but more focused on still issues of color and the
Yes.
inequalities that still exist, that
Yes.
are totally inappropriate
Yes.
because
Yes.
those inequalities cost us that productivity
Yes.
that could
Yes.
be there if that inequality did not exist. And it
Wow.
just, man, it I, I wish that I could put better words to it. But
Yes.
mankind, humankind, would be so much further ahead without such impediments. And we
Yes.
need, and given this whole climate thing, we
Yes.
need all of us to be able to pull together now in ways that humankind has not been faced with before.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
Wow. Well, George, this I think we probably end up needing to do a whole series because we come from a time era that many people don't know exists, but it's so rich in experiential information and social information. I think Harriet Tubman said, she said, I could have freed a lot more people if they knew they were slaves.
that is so profound.
Yes, yes,
Holy God, that is so profound.
yes. And when you look at some of your accomplishments and some of the things you've been able to do, starting where you started, and you look at all of the assets, all the benefits and things that some of our people have now, it's a lot of it's because they just don't know that it was possible. They didn't know that people like you came through all the challenge. Here you are in the battlefield and you're reading Stars and Stripes, talking about an MBA, like duck, shoot, and read.
Exactly. You might need to explain that. But
Yeah,
yeah, ready, aim, fire. Yeah,
yeah.
wrong answer. Yeah. The
Yeah,
irony is just real brief.
yes,
Save anybody going to LinkedIn or Google or any of that. I have been a commercial banker. I learned how to acquire my own companies, did buyouts for my own account through all of the 80s. And at one point owned 3 manufacturing companies, aerospace, plastics, and do-it-yourselfer supplies, 200 employees. And I also discovered what I wanted to do. A lot of times when you get that doll in the window, that doll in the window doesn't look and feel like you thought it would.
yes,
Um,
yes,
I like being a financial person, helping
Yes.
others, and frankly, doing the big deal once in a while,
Yes.
much more so than managing other people,
Mm,
because I don't like to fire people.
I got you. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the toughest things that a business owner has to do, especially when you move that forward into the context of today's times when everybody's cutting back
Yes.
and
Yes.
people are cutting back in anticipation of tougher times ahead.
Yes. Yes.
And I understand it. At the same time, it still wrenches your soul when you've
Mm,
got to tell somebody to go home and tell their wife, their kids, etc., that good job I had yesterday, I don't have it today, and I don't know where tomorrow is going to take us. Uh,
yeah. Yeah.
that's that's tough.
That's
One
tough.
has to do that and do even tougher things.
Yes.
But I prefer being a dispenser of capital to
Yes.
help others acquire that capital, to help them manage it, and to do well, not just for themselves, but to do well for the collective.
Yes. Yes.
When one of us succeeds, all of us succeed.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
that's the way we were
Yeah.
reared.
Yes. Yes.
And we do carry the standard for everybody who looks like us. I truly do believe that.
Yes.
I've always been taught that. That's one of the byproducts of A&T.
That's right. And and when your mama told, when you leave here, boy, you represent me.
You used almost those exact words.
That's right. And I think that's what mothers told us and fathers too. They told us that, and we believed it. You,
Yeah.
you know, George, moving into that corporate area, you gave kind of a quick synopsis. You moved into the corporate arena. How did you move? So was it a quick move? Was it a move that you had to grow through? How did that happen?
Well, all of the above. When I
Okay.
say I came into the financial services industry primarily in the big banks,
Mm-hmm.
in a time when they were just beginning to recognize their capacities both in the US system and abroad.
Yes.
And there were very few banks that had MBAs, for instance, and that had formal recruiting systems for MBAs. So we were allowed freedoms early on in our careers in terms of managing our paths forward that others weren't.
Mm.
And for the first time ever, it began almost open exchange of people moving from one institution to the other. My initial job was with Wells Fargo, which was a great institution at the time, still a great institution.
Mm-hmm.
They just got some kinks to work out. Bottom line is that people just did not move from one bank to the other in those days in the big banking community. In the
Mm-hmm.
banks that tried to poach others' employees were not considered members of, quote, the club.
Mm-hmm.
That began to change in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, I was able to negotiate a move to a much more, at that time, much more sizable and capable, and pardon the background, I forgot to turn the phones off.
Uh-huh.
The bank in Chicago, Continental, Illinois, which at that time was considered the second best corporate bank on the planet,
Wow.
second only to JP Morgan. And we worked
Uh-huh.
closely with Morgan and a lot of the other big guys. And I had some great experiences there and had a bit of success in both institutions simply because I worked so hard. I wasn't the smartest guy on the planet,
Uh-huh.
but it's hard for you to outwork work.
I got you.
Brilliance only counts for so much. But I always worked I spent many Saturdays in in the banking halls, and I was the only one on a floor that normally would seat 50 or 60 people.
Yes.
But I got stuff done as a result, and most of it successfully. And then by then, I had really locked in on my desire to own my own companies. And I began to finance buyouts in the late 70s out of Chicago.
Yes.
Learned the system, learned the protocols, and made a few contacts, and moved back in a more senior capacity to a smaller bank, only $4 billion at the time, which today would probably be equivalent to a few $100 billion. And did well there, was promoted and wound up at 33 as a division manager of a near $1 billion division of this same bank. And the youngest officer I had working for me was myself.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
It was a great experience. It was an humbling experience because in this case, I was up in Oregon and had a great experience there, personally, professionally, et cetera. But it still didn't get me to the entrepreneurial goal. And I wound up leaving and acquiring my first company, and then spent most of the next 10 years as the buyout entrepreneur, buying little guys, fixing them up and selling them for the most part successfully.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience. And as a result of these sorts of experiences, I was able to meet a whole lot of people that I would not have met otherwise in so many different verticals. And when I say the vertical, referring to the particular industry group, whether it be aerospace, plastics, whatever. And many of those associations stood me well in future years as I came back into banking, and thought I really knew what was going on when I came back in. Because then, and I did know a lot that a lot of bankers did not. Bankers are given more credit than they're due in some cases. They generally are quite bright individuals. But sometimes ego begins to run amok. In any event, I helped two younger brothers raise a fund and left the bank that I was pretty senior at that point to help run the fund. And at the back end of the fund, when we exited, this gets real strange. I was recruited to be the CEO of the first CDFI commercial bank in the state of California.
Wow.
And I said no 3 times, and they kept coming, largely because I had a love affair with the city of Oakland, then and now.
Yes.
Oakland to me, Oakland sings to me the way Harlem sings to all of us.
Yes. Yes.
And it has for most of my adult life. I love this crazy place. And a lot of really significant people have come out of Oakland, a lot of significant events, not just the Panthers, but I treasure that legacy and what they demonstrated could be done. And if I remember correctly, in fact, their earliest director of military training, whatever, was a Vietnam vet.
Wow. Okay.
From the 101st, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
But in any event, that when I came back to Oakland, I felt like I was home. I felt at home, and I still feel at home here.
Yes.
Even though my bloodlines run to Goldsboro and Murfreesboro, still.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And it's been a wonderful experience. We were able to get the bank going, stabilized, and marginally profitable. And today, that same bank has grown to the point that it's nearly $1 billion in assets.
Wow.
And still ministering to the community. And I'm just so proud, not of what we accomplished so much as the fact that it was demonstrated what could be done by others. And there are now hundreds of CDFI banks, several hundred around the country, performing to the same mission. And also doing a fine job of being a classic commercial bank as well.
Yeah.
But the point being that there are places where we can have access to capital on reasonable terms for our ventures in ways that we are not received still in much of the major financing community, whether it be commercial banking, investment banking, VCs, et cetera.
Now, for our listeners, George, what does CDFI mean?
The CDFIs, the Commercial Development Financial Institution, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
I've only been around the term for nearly 30 years. I should remember. And the CDFIs were originally, as I remember, a brainchild of George Herbert Walker Bush.
Ooh, okay.
But he lost the election in 92. And when President Clinton, whom I still revere to this minute, when President Clinton took over office, he had a much more liberal activist agenda and so far as sharing the wealth economically.
Yes.
And he authorized and was involved to some extent, I understand, in the development of the CDFIs under the U.S. Treasury.
Yes.
The CDFI fund, which is the entity that runs all the CDFIs, authorizes and supervises them around the country.
Yes.
Reports directly to the Secretary of the Treasury.
Yes.
And as a result of running the bank, I got to know marginally, I got to know two secretaries of the Treasury as a result, because they watch what the CDFIs were doing to be sure that, one, you're doing what a bank should do,
right,
but also that you are performing to mission and bringing benefit to the underserved communities which need the support that we were there to deliver. And they're both bank and non-bank CDFIs.
Wow.
But bottom line is, it was a very enriching experience toward the tail end of my formal career. And I retired from the bank in 20 years ago, I think, this year. And discovered that I'm not one of those, I'm a horrible golfer. I get seasick fishing. There are some people who are better working, and I'm one of those. And what I've done is a lot of community, one would call it community activist work, working with our churches to help where help is needed. And I'm a co-founder of a nonprofit that is doing reasonably well in general capital access, but really we've begun to focus on affordable housing development in addition to the capital access piece.
Wow. Yeah.
So
life
has been interesting.
Now, let me, you know,
I don't have to get up at 6 in the morning and go out to the fields, though.
I got you. Well, let me do this. I have a couple more questions. We're going to wrap up. Let me just take a 2-minute break. I want to recycle something. 1 second.
Okay.
Just pause everything for a minute. Yeah, good.
Okay.
All right, I'm back, George.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And I just glanced at the clock and
Yes.
I didn't realize I had talked so long. My apologies.
No,
Didn't
that's
mean
okay. No, I enjoyed it. We call it a pause for the cause.
to have the t-shirt.
I got you. I got you, man.
Speaking of t-shirts, by the way, I tend to hold on to old things.
Uh-huh.
This is a t-shirt from
Uh-huh.
the year 2000 when the last NBA All-Star game was held here in Oakland.
Oakland. Wow. So you
I'm,
got that. Yeah, that's a
I,
classic.
I'm a native Tar Heel. Basketball comes first.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, George, as you talk, you've been at a level of business that so few of us get to, number one, done it successfully, and have really shared so much of it with the world, with just, you know, the impact, as you say. They always want to know that there's a impact statement that's being effective, but also with our community, with our historical community, with other brothers, sisters of color, that to let them know, to let all young people know, but in particular our folks, to let them know that it's possible. You know,
You know, I'm going to say something that is both literal and sounds comical, but it's true. I want to be certain that when I see my father again, that I have done what you just said. And I can say to him what I have done, and he will say, well done.
Well done. Well done. Wow.
That's what it's about.
Yes. Well, you know, George, when you listen to your background and your history, what were just maybe one or two obstacles? Because I'm sure that to go where you went, when you say only two, yeah, but one or two obstacles that really, like those Goliath moments, those things that stood in your way, and how you were able to overcome them. Yeah.
One which this is not meant to shed institutional shade, but the facts are the facts. When my first corporate job working at Wells Fargo, I considered myself very fortunate to be one of only 4 MBAs hired by the then 7th largest bank in the country, and in a very elevated part. I had interviewed at Goldman Sachs as well in corporate finance, and had done fairly well, but it was clear to me I was not a creature for the street.
Okay.
Those guys were working 6 days a week, 12 to 16 hours a day.
Wow.
And I had just gotten married and had my first child. No. But in any event, the other MBAs that I went to work with in corporate at Wells all had a training program laid out for them by their division heads, and their division heads supervised them closely, took them out on calls with them, showed them the ropes, and et cetera. And my boss did none of that. My boss, my division head, who really was he was an old San Francisco Brahmin, and a Harvard Business School graduate, very smart guy, very hardworking, very successful. He didn't mean anything ill by it. He just didn't know what needed to be done. And he just said, go forth and multiply, in effect. He didn't say, but I would have just sat there and read credit files for 4 years or 5 years, left to the system's natural devices. Bottom line was I fashioned my own training program.
Ooh.
When I say I fashioned my own training program, I fashioned my own training program. I set up a system of visitation where I visited certain branches and I visited other divisions. I sat in the internal auditors division at the bank. I spent several weeks, in fact, I think a month on the commercial banking platform. I worked in the technology division in then small and growing Silicon Valley, which did not exist more or less then. I saw more of the bank than a lot of folks had ever seen as a result. And as a result, the other trainees came to me and asked to be part of what I was doing because they were seeing me see things and do things that they were not seeing and doing. They had great leadership and were having great experiences in a conventional fashion, but they were not getting the breadth of exposure that I was as a result.
Wow.
So I could have sat there very quietly and just collected a paycheck for a while before somebody realized that that was just a dead spot in the ocean. But instead, I said, I'm going to do what feels right and first determine what is productivity here, what is defined as productivity, business development, and being a quote good credit person, good credit analyst, et cetera. And then I had one person in that group who was a senior lender reach out to me and help me along the way periodically. Rex Andrews, never forget him. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful dude. Had been a Navy pilot in Vietnam. It was part of the kindred spirit there. And that he was the senior officer on a couple of things that I did that very quickly were reassigned to me. So I had my own portfolio in like 9 months.
Wow.
I went to our boss and said, I think I'm ready to work some accounts. And he talked to Rex. Rex said, oh, he's ready. Wow. So it was a great and a learning experience. I don't know if I would have been equal to some of the experiential things, the behavioral things that were needed if I had not had the military experience.
Okay.
The military experience, I knew enough not to criticize my boss in that circumstance. And I didn't feel any sense of rancor or ill will from him. He just wasn't sure what to do. So bottom line is let him do what he wants to.
Well, you know, that's a powerful lesson because, you know, when there's no way, make a way.
It's that simple.
No way. Reverend Ike used to say, he said, Harris, one day I had to, as you say, fire somebody. He didn't like doing that. And he didn't call it fire. He said, we want to give him an opportunity for growth.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know, you didn't say to him why. You often say, well, Reverend, what's your thinking on that? You don't say, why do you want to do that? What's your thinking? He says, well, you know, I hired the person, but they don't know what to do. He says, I'm not going to hire them and tell them how to do it. That's why I hired them.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think that's a great learning point, you know, for our young people and for anybody, really. At any point in your life, at that point where there's no way, then make a way. Look at what you have and make something out of it.
And in those situations, those circumstances, one very often gets paranoid about everybody around them being against them as well, when they have something to do and you have nothing to do. But in reality, those folks around you can be allies and support. And that's what happened with me.
Yeah.
The guy who had referred me to the bank to begin with was a year ahead of me and an officer. He served as a resource for me at times. And one of my peers served as a resource. Both of them retired as chief credit officers, one of Wells Fargo Bank and the other of First Bank.
Wow.
One was a brother and one was Caucasian.
Yes.
And both are my closest friends to this day.
Okay. Now, I guess I have a couple more questions. Operating on that level, there are guys like Ken Chenault and Reggie Lewis and some of the other. Did you all have kind of a brotherhood or a connection between one another?
There were connections. The reality is, though, that those connections were geographic largely for
Okay.
us.
Yeah.
Everybody, literally every African American in corporate lending west of Chicago knew each other.
Uh-huh.
And when I say that, I literally mean that.
Yeah.
First, there were so few of us, but secondly, we exchanged ideas, support, etc. The new Eastern faction, especially the Northeast, were generally in a league of their own, both by perception. There's a little elitism going on there.
Yes.
And I think I have met Chenault one time, just seemed like a great guy. And I've heard great things about him.
Yes.
And can't even remember the brother's name, who ran Bowery Bank, and then he was chair of Citibank's board for a long time. You asked me his name. You asked me about him the other day when we talked. I can't remember. I've been accused of looking like him, even though he's about 2-3 inches taller than me.
Yes, yes, yes. It'll come to us. It'll come to us. Yeah.
We all knew each other and we all worked together, whether it's commercial banking, to a large extent investment banking, and the then fast growing Black venture community, usually not in the way of formal VC companies then as now, but more the minority enterprise SBICs, the MESBICs.
Yeah.
And one of those was Equico. Equico served as a learning ground and a launching pad for a number of African American venture capitalists and entrepreneurs in the fundings that they did across the country.
Yeah.
The last deal that I did as an entrepreneur was funded by Equico, as an example. Okay. And those are little known quiet heroes of the last 40 years. Those entities, those that survived and those that really did substantial outreach. Another here was Opportunity Capital, run by Peter Thompson, who started with $2 million in 1972. Peter was a Wharton grad, Army officer, and a graduate. I think he was a graduate of Hampton, if I remember correctly. A wonderful, wonderful brother. Peter drove the fund up to $150 million.
Wow.
Investing in small to mid-sized business nationally. And at a certain point, he retired, and that's been at least 10 or 12 years ago. But I saw the impact that he had on numerous African American ventures on a national basis.
Yes, yes.
And those are things that really made my heartstrings really resound and feel good.
Wow, wow.
I know there's several others.
Yeah, Richard Parsons. That's who I think.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
He's a classic example of someone who did well, but it also produced. He hired brothers, and some brothers didn't hire other brothers because they didn't want to be accused of favoritism, etc. That was not a problem with Dick Parsons.
Okay.
And in fact, Dick Parsons, number 2 guy at the Bowery Savings Bank, which was a $1 billion institution, when he it was unheard of in those days for one of us to be considered for a CEO role
Yeah.
in $1 billion financial institution. But he took it, he ran it, turned it around, did a fantastic job. And that's how a number of the other opportunities that came to him. And his number two guy, Roger Williams, I got to know when Roger was a senior person at Fannie Mae, doing the same thing on a national basis through Fannie Mae. And it was, so the network works.
The network works. And that's something I think that we got to really, some of the young people coming into the business arena, those young MBAs and whatnot, but to really have them understand that it's, you got to you have to do your best, but that is not enough. But that is not enough. You got to have those connections, that respect, that relationship, and not only who you know, but who knows you.
You can never promote yourself I don't care who you are or what you're doing. You can never promote yourself as well as somebody else can.
Wow. Wow. Now that's deep. That's deep. Wow. But George, I tell you, I promise you this, we're going to do another interview because there's so many rich, it's almost like a tapestry, like we start off in a little corner, man, another thread will come through, like, man, we need to follow that thread. So we're going to do that. I have a question that's very interesting because you started out on an unusual trajectory. You started out with a good foundation. But as you look back in your life, what advice would you give your younger self?
Don't doubt yourself.
Ooh, that made me chill. Yes, yes, yeah.
We are, when I say, I think generally people of color, but especially Black folks.
Yes.
We doubt ourselves because we've been conditioned to doubt ourselves.
Yes.
Our childhood experiences, our seniors who didn't want us to be devastated when we were disappointed, encountering racism in life. We've been conditioned to doubt ourselves, to underachieve, to aim for less than the heavens. What's the a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what else is a heaven for?
Yes.
We are taught almost the opposite of that. Whatever our preparation,
yes,
don't doubt yourself.
Yeah.
Do reality checks. Reality checks. When I was an entrepreneur, as crazy as it sounds, I used to have a quarterly board meeting with myself.
Okay.
I was trying to hold myself to account for what was happening and remind myself of where I had intended to be going. If I hadn't achieved it, why, and try to be realistic about that. And it helped.
Yes.
It helped. I'm not going to say it was a be all end all. I was times too impulsive, etc. But the bottom line is, if you don't hold yourself accountable, sooner or later, you're going to pay a price for it.
Wow. If you don't hold yourself accountable, sooner or later, you're going to have to pay the price. Man.
Everybody's got to pay the price. You got to do the work and you got to pay the price. Man. Whatever the outcome.
Yeah. Now, I guess the other side of that question, now you're retired, you've accomplished a lot, but if you look down the road 20, 25 years, the George 25 years from now, when you look back, what advice would you give yourself now about how to go forward?
I think the same advice.
Wow. Yeah.
And what that goes to, that illustrates the depth and the power of self-doubt.
Yes.
That the system plants in us, keeps in us.
Yes. Yes. Man. Well, George, I tell you this, man, I think a lot of people, you've shared stuff that so many of our young people have never heard, don't know this ever happened. And that, and you're not alone. Like you said, there was a network of other people of color who learned and mastered, who felt challenges and who had that connection and that stamina to keep doing. You had a great asset. You have a wife that has been right there with you, man. Talk about hold your feet to the fire.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Still,
Yes.
that's her job, and she does it well.
Well, so I know we'll have some more another interview, another series of things, because there's so many areas I want to go in. But just one, thank you for all the positive things that you've done. Thank you for the good things you said about our book. Thank you for just being a person of example. You know, many times the greatest thing you can do in life is to be an example. Yeah. When people just to know that somebody else did it. You know, I'm sure Roger Bannister, he before he ran that 4-minute mile, he didn't have an example, but so he made the example. But once he did it, within
everybody did it.
Everybody did it. You know, now you do it in high school.
I just want to add one thing as we
That's
part.
it.
First of all,
yes.
Thank you for allowing me to be part of this. But I also, as you know, my undergraduate roommate in Chapel Hill, and still one of my closest friends, who was 3 or 4 years behind you at Williston High School.
Yes.
And what I was told about you many, many years ago was that the educators in Wilmington, North Carolina, felt that you had the finest mind that ever came out of Wilmington, North Carolina. Wow. And I've never forgotten that. That's a quote.
Yes. Well, thank you. I you know, sometimes, like you say, that doubt, sometimes I doubt it.
We belong to the same club.
Yes. Well, I tell you, George, this has been just an inspiration to me. I thank you so much. And if there's any other parting words you want to share, do so.
My parting words would be, the world is so chock full of opportunity now that it is incredible, and it's changing every day. And those, what we see as challenges, are really more and more opportunity. And I urge everybody on this podcast and everybody you can reach out and touch, to remind them of this opportunity. And whatever you do, whatever you're doing, don't ever quit. Lay out your plans, etc. Whatever turn they take along the way, don't ever quit. Risk and ever how this sounds, I do believe that the strongest of us survived the Middle Passage. So we are more than equal to any task that is before us.
Well, George, on those words, hang all the law and the prophecy.
More or less, yes.
Well, thank you so much, my friend. We sure appreciate you. I'll share this with you when you have your own copy. But to our listeners, you know, we're going to be coming back, because I know that when you listen to this conversation, you're going to hear, you've heard some things that you say, man, I didn't know, and I want to know more. And so I know that George and I are going to get together again and delve into some of these other issues, like that power of the HBCUs. I think that's something that people need to know. They've, you know, over the years, so much of that is like sort of, and maybe when you have a lot of options, you know, maybe we saw it because our options were fewer, but just because they were fewer, they were still a great experience for us to have, for our children to have, and gives us a whole nother level. There's some ideas. Yes.
One last quip.
Yes.
that 22-year-old grandson,
Yes.
the brilliant one,
Yes.
he got all those genes from his grandmother, not his grandfather. He's about to do a 10 HBCU tour introducing tech, Silicon Valley possibilities, et cetera, as we speak. And I would have killed to have had such opportunity for exposure when I was coming through.
Well, you know what? The progress may be slow, but we have made progress.
We have made progress and continue to.
Yes, sir. Well, folks, today you've had an opportunity to hear something special. We're going to be back. We will be back again. And I want to thank each and every one of you for listening, because it's all about possibilities, perception, and the choices you make to change your life so that you can be whatever you want to be, do whatever you want to do, and have anything you desire, always knowing that the best is yet to come. And so it is.